My next guest is an actor, TV personality, writer and a broadcaster. Beginning his career way back in the television halcyon days, I suppose you might remember the golden days of TV sketch comedies. Firstly, he was with D-Gen, Fast Forward and Full Frontal. They were some trailblazing TV shows, weren't they? We miss that sort of TV these days. We don't have that type of variety. We've got these other jolly shows on of cooking and stuff. And I don't know, they can throw those away if I had my way and get more variety. Anyway, that's another thing. But Michael Veitch is back on stage with his own one-man show called Flack. It's at the Alex Theatre. It's coming on October the 22nd and 23rd, and Michael's online to talk to us now. Michael, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Leigh. Lovely to talk to you.
Yeah, you too, mate. Thank you very, very much. Gee, you've got a few secrets in your life, haven't you? And I mean the World War II.
Please don't tell them all, Leigh.
Oh, no, not all of those. No, we'll keep those.
It would take up far more than it would far more than your show. I fear, my friend, to go through all of them. But no.
Well, it's a long way, isn't it, from comedy to being a serious author like you are?
It is. But, I think I was, in a way, an author first. In a way, my family were all writers. My dad was a journo, my mum was a journo, and I always thought I'd end up being a writer more than a performer. Now, it's sort of hybrid now. I kind of do both because I've always had this abiding interest in the aviation of the Second World War, and I've written 4 books. I've just had a book come out recently called 44 Days about the air defence of Port Moresby, but I've had Flack, which is the result of a couple of books I did, basically tracking down former air veterans of the Second World War and getting their stories that they'd never told before, because I figured that every man who flew during World War II has at least one extraordinary story. And so that's what the books became. And I thought they affected me so much, meeting these wonderful, interesting and terribly humble men who did incredible things. I mean, incredible things that they don't really think was much at all. I thought I'd want to sort of keep them alive, because that generation, Leigh, is really leaving us now. This is the World War II generation. But I've kept them alive by doing this show, which I've toured a couple of times around the country, and I'm so glad to be able to bring it finally to the Alex Theatre in St Kilda.
What you were saying there is quite true, Michael. I mean, so the World War II veterans are leaving us, sadly, but of course life goes on and they become older. And to capture their memoirs, as it were, and be able to talk to these guys, then put it into paper and into a book, I think it's a wonderful thing that you're doing. I really do.
Well, thank you. And what I usually found was that what started off as almost a kind of just a story-gathering exercise became far more than that, because I realised doing the interviews with these fellas, and because I've had a lifelong interest in the subject, I could talk to them on in their language, so to speak. Yeah, they weren't, talking to some Joe who didn't really know what they were talking about, that was just doing a job. I've had a real passion for this all my life. They opened up to me, by and large, and I realised that, oh my goodness, I'm actually hearing these stories for the first time, and that they're telling them for the first time, because often their families didn't know. I'll never forget one extraordinary story of a bow fighter. He was an observer in a Bristol bow fighter, cut an amazing long story short, shot down over the Mediterranean, taken prisoner, escaped from the Germans, had this amazing adventure that you couldn't put in a film because it would seem too far-fetched. And his wife of 50 years was sort of standing in the same room with us, and she was holding a plate of sandwiches that we just demolished. And in a pause in what he was saying, she turned to me and said, I've been married to him for 50 years. I've never heard that before.
There you are.
and to which his response was, I'll never forget it, well, you never asked me, love.
Well, there you are. Michael, it must be very emotional for these men, relaying these stories to you.
Very much so, Leigh, very much so. And often I had to, this is why it became more than a storytelling, because I found myself almost the kind of keeper of these often terribly traumatic memories of, death and violence, and by almost always the most dramatic period of their lives. There's nothing much in an ordinary life to replicate what it's like going to war for good and bad, usually the bad. And so they really, it doesn't go away, as we know, with people who are now coming back from Afghanistan.
That's right.
The post-traumatic stress and all that. It doesn't go away, so it's always there. But, as many people realise, especially that generation, they just didn't talk about it often until later life and until someone like me comes along and sort of, digs it out of them.
Michael, you're quite right. My dad was in the Second World War. He passed away many years ago now. But he was a man who would never talk about the war. No matter what I asked him, we'd asked to go to the marches and all this sort of stuff. He would have nothing to do with any of it. He came back and he was not the same man as when he went.
Yes. Where was he? Where did he go?
The Middle East. He was
Middle
up.
East,
yeah. It was up in Port Moresby as well, and it was just a dreadful time. So he would not talk about it.
Yes.
I've read his diary and so on, but from that you get some insight. But these men did come back, as you're saying, and didn't want to talk.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? And they were often encouraged not to talk either. They was, their belief was that. And, that the people have told them, look, nobody can understand what we've been through. It's best just to move on and forget about it, which is all very well to say, but I don't think people really work. I don't think we function like that. Well, not healthily anyway. But so Leigh, what I've done with Flack is to gather 5 of the most interesting stories and the most interesting characters, and I basically present them in character on stage. The show goes for an hour, and there's quite a bit of me, my younger, slightly younger self, moving in and out in between it, giving some sort of context, and so it's a one-man show, if you like, but there are kind of 6 characters, including myself, in it, and this is sort of my passion. This show, I'm sort of bring them to stage, bring them to life on stage, and so people who are all interested in what aviation was like, what fighting a war in the air was like in the Second World War, you can get a pretty good feel of what it was actually like. The variety of the people I bring is it's an Australian Lancaster pilot who's still with us, a fellow called Bruce, who lives up in central Victoria. He had an incredible experience. His Lancaster exploded. And he was in it, and he survived in extraordinary circumstances. The only British Battle of Britain pilot I ever met, a fellow called James Coward, who's no longer with us, but he was shot down in the middle of the Battle of Britain, and I met him, and a German fellow who met Hitler and was decorated by Hitler and had an incredible war. And a Welshman and another Australian flying boat pilot, who also is still with us, a fellow called Dudley, who lives up in Mildura. So,
Michael, how did you find these people?
Well, this was an interesting process. It was a kind of an organic process. I didn't really know how to find them. Initially, at the time, I was actually doing another theatre show, and I got a spot on Bert Newton on GMA. And to talk about the play ostensibly, but Bert didn't want to talk about the play. He wanted to talk about this project I was doing. So the poor old producer had to sort of, in the wings of the studio, sort of just say, talk about the bloody play, talk about the bloody play. And for 5 minutes, Bert talked about this and said, oh, look, all right, well, if you know, if you know a former World War II aviator, give the station a call and we'll put you on to Michael. And about 100 people rang up.
That
became the nucleus of, and it was often, I think my dad flew, and my Uncle Jim flew, and my headmaster flew. Here's his number. So I basically sort of just tracked down these people and said, look, you don't know me, but can I come to your place and interview you about the most...
That must have taken you a long time, Michael.
It took me a couple of years. Well, I ended up doing three books for 2 different publishers. The first one was Flack, came out about 11 years ago. Then a book called Fly, and then a book called Heroes of the Skies, which came out last year with Penguin. But it did take me a while, but it was always an honour, and I just couldn't believe I was getting paid to do it. Come sit with these men, record their stories and put them in a book. It was just terrific.
Michael, I've seen a bit of you online with this performance that you've got a flack. Am I right in saying you get very emotional yourself in this?
Well, you... I do. I used to. You know, the thing is, I think you have to show the emotion when
Yes.
you're acting. I don't think you can be emotional yourself. I think the notion of the actor actually crying on stage for real, I don't think that works. I think that kind of tears the wall down in my book somehow. We can get onto the fineries of this, which would
But
take a
you
while.
sort of do portray the emotion. The emotion's coming. You can see
certainly
it
do.
coming through, can't you? Yeah.
It's a very emotional experience that I convey that really marked these men's lives. So yes, I mean, yes, no, there are parts of it that are funny. There are parts of it. Sorry, mate, there's the tram going past.
That's all right.
I'm caught in the middle of
Just put your hand up and stop the thing. Yeah.
Well, it's one of the old W class, so they're rattling
right.
past Lonsdale Street here. But it is. I do convey serious emotion, especially in some of the trauma that these men went through. But they really just would, when they told me, they just stuck to the facts. Say, look, this is what happened. Of course, it was a dreadful experience, but this is what happened. And so that's how I try to honour them, really, in this show Flack that I've been touring around. And I've been having a wonderful time doing it.
I've got to get to one of your secrets. Now, I'm going to ask you... No, this is quite good. What is the connection to the former WA jewellery dynasty?
Oh, my goodness. That's true. Well, my middle name is Caris.
Is it?
Caris. It's my middle name, and that was my mother's maiden name. So my second given name was my mother's maiden name. Now, my mother came from a great old jewellery... How did you find this out? A great old jewellery dynasty called Caris Brothers, which started in Kalgoorlie.
Go on.
Kalgoorlie gold.
Yeah.
Yep. They made their money with Kalgoorlie gold, and then they moved to Perth, and then they moved to Adelaide. And unfortunately, they were shocking business people, and they all went bust after just even on the eve of the Great Depression. Actually,
Oh, gee.
Sadly, one of my mother's first memories is of the Steinway Grand being taken away.
Oh, no. Oh, she would have been crying. Oh, goodness.
Oh, boy. Don't get me started. My poor old mum. But God rest her soul. But then... and there still is, in Perth, there is Caris Brothers Jewellers.
Still there?
Still the same business, except that we've got nothing to do with it. In fact, once when I was over in Perth, I went in and said, foolishly to the kind of young girl working behind the counter, "Oh, hello, I'm actually related to this jewelry family." And she went, "Yes, can I help you with something?"
Your secret is out. Good on you, Michael.
Out, yeah.
Look, it's at the Alex Theatre. We're talking about Flack, FLAK, and it's there for a couple of nights. You've got
we're doing 2 matinees on the Saturday and the Sunday, and 1 evening show on the Saturday night.
On the Saturday night, good. Okay,
yeah.
So the 22nd and 23rd of October.
Terrific little theatre too.
It's marvellous.
A great place.
Yeah, marvellous.
It's such a boon that we've got it now.
Alex has done a good job with that, hasn't he?
He certainly has. Yes, Alex Bass, terrific fellow.
Yeah, my word, my word. Look forward to seeing you down there on the night, mate. You take care. Thank you for your time today, and we'll look forward to seeing the show.
It's been my great pleasure, Leigh. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Bye-bye.
Take care, please. Bye-bye to you.